Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Unlocking the Paradigm Portal. My name is Sarah. So you may notice that I'm a little bit quieter this morning, and that is because if you recall last week, we've been talking about the one stone, actually for the last 2 weeks, and what is the one stone that you are going to lay in the foundation of becoming who you want to be. Well, mine for today is that I normally record these in the evening, like right before I go to bed, so that it is all loaded and ready to go for 6 a.m. But I decided, no, I want to get up earlier. So I have gotten up at 5 o'clock this morning to be my one stone for today and record. So this is literally the first time I am speaking this morning. And without further ado, this week, taking off from yesterday's Sunday deep dive, we are going to talk about love and the feeling in your body when you meet them, that person, that pull, that recognition, that sense of finally, this one, I know this one. And you call it chemistry, and you call it connection, and you called it knowing. I just know in my gut. And some of you may have called it love. I know I certainly have in the past. And I need you to sit with a different possibility today. What if that feeling wasn't recognition of the right person? What if it was recognition of a familiar wound? And this is how it ties into yesterday's episode. If you listen to that one, I spent the last week mapping out not only relationships, which yes, we know I've done in the past, but the threads tying between all of them, like the singular thread tying there. And then I mapped out my relationships with my children and the thread tying between there of the lessons that they have been highlighting for me. And then I mapped out generational patterns, both sides of my family, and the thread that passed down through the line. And then I connected the dots with all three of those strings, which is why it's called 3 balloons or 3 strings. I can't remember which one hand, because it all came down to what is the one underlying wound. And that often, that recognition of connection ties back to that wound. And that is the awareness that I had this week, which is why we're talking about it. And the wound disguises itself. And the nervous system, it doesn't distinguish between love and familiarity. It distinguishes between safe and unsafe. And it defines safe as whatever it already knows. So that wounding, that is so deeply ingrained that anyone that presents aligned with that wounding is going to feel familiar. So the wound that a lot of my stuff came down to was the unworthy wound. And I can see it tying through everybody. And that wound being so familiar is basically what it means is if you grew up in an environment where love came with conditions. And now let me make sure to clarify this. With everything I talk about, there is zero judgment. So if you're listening to this and you're getting all judgy about past situations or people or childhood, stop, please. This is just observing the situation and the facts. So when I say an environment where love may have come with conditions, it often is not obvious or overt or intentional. And then there are times where it was. So you have to use your own discernment, theme for 2026. But anyway, so if you grew up in an environment where love came with conditions or where your worth was contingent, like where you had to earn your place by being useful enough to keep or to have around, or where affection maybe arrived inconsistently and you learned to work for it, then your nervous system learned to call that love. Not because it was love, but because it was familiar. And then you went out into the world and you kept choosing it. You keep choosing it. Different faces, different dynamics, different stories, same frequency underneath. So if you have, let's say, like I have always had, and I've worked my ass off on it and can see it now, an unworthy wound, then you will be drawn to people and situations that resonate with that same frequency. And you don't realize it until you suddenly realize it, or you do an intensive, basically shamanic soul retrieval deep dive for months. So Maybe the frequency is the person who needs rescuing. You learned that your worth or your wound is tied to saving people. So you're drawn to those people, or the person who saw you as the lifeline. Maybe you learned how that your worth is like being the hero, or the person whose chaos felt electric because calm felt suspicious. That was my jam for a long time. Calm and peace felt like something was wrong. Something was going to go very wrong. And anyone who felt chaotic, that was wonderful. That is no longer a theme for me. And that is because calm was unfamiliar. And even if you want it, even if you're striving for it, even if you openly state, I want peace and stability, if it is not your familiar comfort zone, you can want it, it can feel good, and then it suddenly starts to register in your nervous system as unsafe and dangerous. Or maybe it was the one whose wound fit yours so precisely that that fit felt like destiny. Like your wounding called to the wounding in them and vice versa. And it feels magical, but it's a trauma bond. And wound recognition feels exactly like soul recognition. And that is not a flaw in you. That is how the wound protects itself, by disguising itself as the thing you're looking for. And it feels like magic. And you stay and you carry all the weight and you make yourself indispensable. And you love harder when the love didn't come back at the same volume, because some part of you believed that if you could just love them enough, or be patient enough, or understanding enough, or present enough, or give them enough, they would finally confirm what you needed to know about your own worth. But here's the thing, they couldn't, and they can't. And it's not because they don't care, because a person cannot heal your wound by receiving your love. That is not how wounds work. That is not how worth works. You cannot outsource the answer to the question the wound is asking. It just doesn't work. And the wound is always asking the same question. And I'm going to grab a sip of my coffee before I tell you, just for a little bonus suspense. I was smart enough to make coffee before getting on here. So the question that the wound is asking, am I enough? Just as I am, without the caring, without all the things I can offer, without the nurturing I can give, without the performing, without making myself useful enough to justify my presence? That is the question. And I want to get specific, because this is where a lot of people will just nod along and then immediately exempt themselves from this situation. They think they know what this looks like. And they picture the dramatic relationships, the ones with the obvious red flags, the ones they can point to and say, yes, that was clearly dysfunction. But rein it in and hold up your self-righteous indignation. I guarantee, since no one is born, I had a therapist once who would say to me, wouldn't it be great if everyone was born self-actualized? Yes, no one is. So at some point, if not still to this day, and I would love actually to hear from someone who to this day can say, I've never had a wound recognition relationship. So, wound recognition doesn't always look dramatic. So if you're one of those people saying, that's not me, it doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like finally feeling understood. Sometimes it looks like finally feeling seen and known. And sometimes it looks like someone who sees you in a way that you've been waiting your whole life to be seen, or who knows you in a way you've been waiting to feel known. And sometimes it looks like the most profound connection you've ever felt, the kind that makes every other relationship feel shallow by comparison. And sometimes it looks like a person who is genuinely good and genuinely kind, and who loves you in ways you can see and name, and who is still underneath all of that goodness, running a wound that fits yours precisely. and whose presence keeps confirming the question rather than answering it. And the most dangerous version of wound recognition is the one that looks like the real thing, the one that hits every note, checks every box, feels like the answer you've been waiting for, like the one that keeps you the longest because it's the hardest to name when everything about it feels true. And here's how you know the difference in practice. Soul recognition expands you. Wound recognition contracts you slowly over time and in ways that you rationalize because that contraction might feel like growth. But soul recognition, that makes you more yourself. That means it's that feeling of, oh, I can just exhale and I can be me. And wound recognition makes you more useful. It makes you feel like you have a purpose. And soul recognition asks nothing of you. It doesn't want you to stay small. Wound recognition requires that you stay small. It's being able to identify those hard edges, that box. But the soul recognition is freedom, and it feels like expansion. And soul recognition leaves you feeling more real after the interaction, like you feel open and invigorated, but wound recognition leaves you working to figure out what you did wrong. And that last one, just sit with it for a minute. How many times have you left an interaction with someone that you love and immediately begun auditing yourself? Like asking, what did I say? How did I come across? Did I ask for too much? Was I too much? What did I do wrong? That audit is not love asking you to grow. That is the wound asking you to shrink. And love does not require you to audit your existence after every interaction. That is not love. That is the wound running the relationship while love takes the blame for what the wound cost you. So, what does this mean? First of all, it doesn't mean you abandon everybody and you need to break up with people and end things. It's just having the awareness. Because this can be someone that you love and they are in your life for a reason to show you that wound. And the wound is for you to heal. That is the key, not to heal it through them, for you to heal it in yourself. And I want to name something that most people skip over in this conversation because skipping it lets you off the hook in a way that actually keeps you very stuck. You kept choosing that wound recognition because it felt like home. And it felt like home because it was. But it's not the home you wanted, it's the home you knew. And the nervous system doesn't choose based on what's good for you. It chooses based on what it recognizes. And what it recognized as home from the very beginning was conditional love. Love that required you to earn it, to perform it, to make yourself useful enough to justify it. Then unconditional love, when it showed up, probably felt wrong. It probably felt suspicious and specifically targeted to have you fall prey to something because you weren't used to someone who just loved you for you. And it probably felt like it was hiding something, like maybe it wasn't giving you the familiar friction that your system had learned to call connection. The relationships that cost you the most were also the ones that felt the most like something because the wound doesn't run on nothing. It runs on intensity, on the push and the pull, on the cycle of earning and losing and earning again. And on the feeling of finally getting through to someone who keeps pulling away and who keeps denying you what you believe is love. That feeling is not love. It is the nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. And this is where the compassion comes in. And it's not to let yourself off the hook because understanding this accurately is the only thing that actually changes it. You didn't choose wrong because something is wrong with you. You chose what your nervous system was calibrated to recognize as connection. And that calibration happened before you were old enough to question it, before you had any other reference point, before you knew there was a different way the body could feel when it was actually safe. And the choosing, it wasn't stupidity, it wasn't weakness, it wasn't a character flaw. It was your nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do, seeking the frequency it was built to call home. And the problem isn't that you loved. The problem is that you called wound recognition love. Wound recognition is not love, but you felt that it was. And you built your entire relational life on that foundation. And now you know. which is the only thing that makes a next chapter different from the last one. So here's what it actually changes when you can understand this and really integrate it into your life. Not the feeling. The feeling doesn't disappear. That pull doesn't go silent. The recognition doesn't stop arriving. You will still feel the electric click of a familiar wound frequency, and your nervous system will still register it as significant. But what changes is what you do in the space between feeling it and following it, because there is a space now. The space didn't always exist, but for most of your life, that move pulled you indirectly into action, and you felt it and you moved toward it without stopping, without thinking, because the recognition felt like instructions. It felt like you were handed a manual. This is my person. Like the body already knew, and following it was just common sense. But the space is new, and the space is the work. And when I say the work, it's with a capital W. It's like this work. It's no joke digging into these things and really looking at yourself clearly. So the next time you feel that pull, like that electric recognition and that sense of, I know you, you have a question to ask before you follow it. Not to talk yourself out of every connection, but to be able to tell the difference between the ones that are real and the ones that are familiar. Is this soul recognition? Or is this my wound recognizing itself in someone else and calling it home? So remember, soul recognition expands. Wound recognition contracts. Soul recognition makes you more yourself. You can sink into it. Wound recognition makes you more useful. Soul recognition doesn't require you to be small and dim. That light that I always talk about, that light shines brighter with that soul recognition. Wound recognition depends upon you staying small, staying useful, and staying dim. And you don't have to answer it perfectly. You don't have to get it right every time. You don't have to have the full answer before you take another step. You just have to ask the question. Because the asking, that pause between the feeling and the following, it's already something completely different from everything that came before. The choosing will change when the asking becomes automatic. And the asking becomes automatic when you practice it. And you practice it by starting today on your commute right now. So your stone for today, name one relationship, past or present, where the pull felt like recognition. And sit with this question honestly. Was that your soul or was that the wound? And you don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to tell anybody. You just have to be honest with yourself. And that honesty is the stone you carry into the week. And again, this doesn't mean abandoning or leaving relationships, friendships, anything. These people are in our lives to shine a light on the wound for us to heal. You either do the healing work and then decide, or you don't. It's up to you. It's your life. So that was a big one for a Monday morning. I am still half awake, and I'm going to go drink my coffee. So have an amazing, amazing Monday. I will be back Wednesday and Friday morning for the remainder of this week for Be Real Not Nice. By the way, that's the title for these early morning ones. And then I'll be back Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 9 p.m. for Light in the Dark, and Sundays deep dives. So leave me some comments. Let me know. What are you realizing? What's the wound that's popping up for you? I shared mine. You share yours. I've had the unworthy wound. It sucks, but let me tell you, once you see it, you can start changing it, and then shit gets real. Okay. Have a great day.